Season 16, Episode 3, which was The Ball, has now ended. It was a very average challenge, and while I will be talking about it in the future, today I want to talk about Plain Jane. From the day the Meet the Queens promo came out, Plain Jane has been on a complete roller coaster of fan support, fan hatred, and today I thought I would talk about that a bit. Plain Jane's Drag Race story started on December 6, 2023 with the Meet the Queens. Jane had what I would describe as a run-of-the-mill Meet the Queens. She shaded Katya a bit, but apart from that, there wasn't really too much outside of the box for her. The main issue, though, happened a few hours after the Meet the Queens was released, when Plain Jane was accused of touching her audience members inappropriately. These are obviously very serious allegations, especially coming from members of the Brooklyn drag scene, and a lot of people immediately turned on Jane. I will say that based off the information at the time, that was a fair assumption. Thankfully, though, the allegations against Jane turned out to be false, and people kind of forgot about her for a bit. This was around the time that Canada Season 4 was really gaining momentum, so the Jane stuff kinda just faded to the background. I can't really blame fans for that. After Canada Season 4 wrapped up, people started to put a lot more of their focus into Season 15, and Plain was brought back into the spotlight on January 10th when the sneak peek of Episode 2 was released. A lot of people had really high hopes for Jane. She was shown in that first 12 minutes to be like a Mistress Isabelle Brooks type villain, definitely playing up that role. And while some people weren't really vibing with it, a lot of people were fine with it. They were living for the drama. Once again, this is just based off the first 12 minutes that Jane had on Drag Race. This is very good for Jane's trajectory, as villains are a lot better received now than they were back in the day. Jane's trajectory would come crashing down yet again 2 days later when the Episode 2 talent show aired. Jane enters the workroom, and Jane is immediately playing up a persona of a villain. While a lot of the queens in the cast seemed to be vibing with it, some of them were not, and a lot of the fans were not. I was watching a live feed of comments on Reddit as the episode was airing, and Jane was getting a lot of hate. A lot of people were comparing Jane to some of the previous villains that we had seen, like Daya and Mistress. People said this was unlike what Mistress did, because unlike in Mistress's case, where she was just throwing around some light shade, Jane was making that her entire brand and her entire personality, and a lot of people saw that as fake. Things got even worse for Jane in the fanbase's eyes after the talent show had wrapped up. People saw a lot of similarities between Jane's talent show and some of Jimbo's previous work, specifically the massive breastplate, a food-based talent show which we had seen out of Jimbo twice, and a lot of focus on smelling fingers, yet again something that was a part of Jimbo's brand. I am a huge fan of Plain Jane, so definitely take this next part with a grain of salt, but I will say this in Jane's defense. When Jane left to film Season 16, All Stars 8 had not yet aired. Jane had no idea that Jimbo was doing a massive breastplate food-based talent show, and I don't think she would have had any idea that Jimbo's character in the improv challenge would also be focused around smelling fingers. I legitimately believe a lot of this may just have been a very unfortunate coincidence. After the runway and the talent show, the Raider Queen twist takes place. Jane is the only member of the cast to do anything even remotely shady with the rankings. She puts Nymphia Wind in last place, and I believe it was Amanda in first place, in an attempt to boost her odds of being in the top 2. This is an incredible strategic decision. I'm really glad we got to see someone actually play strategy on Drag Race. It really sucks that Nymphia got the short end of the stick here. I really do feel for her. That said, it did make for some really entertaining TV. Jane placed in the top 2 along with Geneva Carr. They lip sync for the win to Shower by Becky G. Jane wins the challenge and also immunity for a later challenge. For the next, I would say 4 to 5 days following the challenge, Jane completely dominates all of the discourse related to the show. Everyone has an opinion on Jane. It is really crazy. It was honestly really shocking to watch. I have never seen someone as polarizing as Jane. I watched season 15, and while Mistress was definitely very polarizing, the fanbase's treatment of Mistress really shifted between liking her and hating her, while with Jane, I definitely get the vibe that the fanbase has split into two camps. None of this is particularly good for Jane's career. She's received a lot of hate. I know a lot of people for the first few days were claiming she was not receiving hate. I don't know what sources they were looking at, but as someone who is on Twitter, as someone who is on Reddit, Jane was getting absolutely torn to shreds, and then she just wasn't. Like, all of a sudden, like 2 or 3 days before the episode aired, all of the plain Jane hate kinda just faded to the background. As someone who was watching it unfold on Reddit, it was not gone. It was absolutely still there after that arbitrary 72-hour mark. It just felt kinda toned down and more balanced out. One day before episode 3 aired, the Drag Race Reddit poll results for the episode 2 talent show came out. It turns out that for all the criticism that Jane got for her talent show being generic, it was a lip sync to an original track, really run-of-the-mill, not outside of the box, the poll still voted Jane into the top 2. After all of the fighting and drama involving her performance being a Jimbo knockoff, she was still voted into the top 2 with 40% of the vote. This leads me to believe that there is a silent majority of plain Jane stans. What further cements this idea is that in the fan vote poll, Plain Jane placed 3rd with 62% of the vote, meaning over 60% of Drag Race fans are actively rooting for Jane. This does not mesh at all with the amount of criticism that Jane got. I'm really interested to see how this plays out later in the season, but now we've arrived at episode 3. Watching this episode, I was absolutely ready for Jane to start being ripped to shreds by the fanbase again. I don't know what switch got flicked between these two episodes, but the focus went from how much of an evil, shady person Jane was, to just, oh, she's kind of a generic villain, she's not really for me, but she's fine. I love that, I'm happy with that, that's a positive discourse, but that is a complete reversal from everything we saw for the first, 4 days. I personally am a huge fan of Plain Jane, I love her drag aesthetic, and I find her very funny. I definitely understand why some people view her as being a bit grating. I just don't agree. I think she's making really good TV, and I think there's a good chance that down the line, after the season is aired, Jane follows the path of Daya and Mistress and becomes a massive fan favorite who everyone retroactively pretends they liked from the start. I'll be honest, I wasn't a big Mistress fan on season 15, I only liked her afterwards, but I've seen a lot of people who sent a lot of hate towards Mistress completely gloss over that and pretend it never happened now that she's a fan favorite. My personal hope is that the Plain Jane hate train dies down and we really don't see this kind of behavior from fans again, but I'm really not sure. Please let me know your thoughts on Plain Jane in the comments. But for now, that is all I have. I will be making a video on the ball sometime in the next week, so definitely try and keep your eyes out for that one. Hey, it's Drag Race Rejudged. Do you want gay shit? Well then check out the RuPaul's Drag Race Rejudged YouTube channel and hit subscribe.